Hi, everyone. This is Tom Broussard. It is Tuesday, August 11th, and I'm talking today about something called inner speech, another accidental tool in aphasia recovery. It's always interesting to me. I don't know if it's interesting to you, but since I had my stroke and eventually had this thing called aphasia, you never know what's going to happen, really, to anybody except for the person that has it. My wife and I were both working at the time, and after a couple of weeks, she had to go back to work, and I was capable enough to figure things out, walk around the house, not get lost, although I did get maps and a phone to make sure I wouldn't get lost. But it is interesting the way you think your way through this when you have stroke or aphasia. In my particular case, I've mentioned this before, an awful lot of my recovery had to do with my habit before my stroke. And I was lucky enough, and I'll often talk about that too, I was lucky enough that I did all of these habits that saved what I otherwise would not have known, what I was thinking about, what I was writing about, because it was my habit to keep track of my life. So I had a great calendar. I've used that for 20, almost 30 some years. I have all those calendars, everything about them. I recorded myself with my phone. I kept track in my diary. I took pictures of the world around me. I did all those things, not because I knew it would make me get better. I did it because I didn't have anything else to do. And I thought, well, if I should record basically what I was doing, not knowing what I was doing would be helpful, maybe that would help me in the future. And of course, in the future, being able to look past at my the evidence of what I had done, I was able then to study the evidence because my brain did get better based on the activities I was doing. So I know it's this recruiting set of activities, doing these things, not knowing that would help me. Eventually got better because of those things. And after I got better, went back and studied the things and the evidence of those things I was doing. I know, it's sort of crazy. That's why I'm so lucky that all this had happened, because I did save all the evidence and kept my diary recording the whole deal. And of course, at the very beginning, I was, like a lot of people, you talk to yourselves. And I was talking to myself, both out loud as well as silently to myself, trying to figure out what was wrong. I mean, I knew what was wrong up to a point, but I didn't know what it would take to get better. So I started having that dialogue with myself on the inside, and would talk to myself. If there was nobody around, I'd talk out loud. If there were people around, I would just talk to myself. And I started to figure out that maybe, because I could see some of the problems, but I couldn't really define those problems, and I certainly couldn't express those problems. That's why I saved all the evidence. Eventually, I'd be able to see what it was that I was doing. So I started thinking of what these problems could be as a thought problem. And the first one I did that I remember, I say that because it appears in my diary, and even though the text in my first 200 pages, the text don't make a lot of sense, all of my drafts and metaphorical drawings do make a lot of sense. So at the very beginning, I thought that I had been told that I had lost a whole bunch of cells, a couple hundred millions, billions of cells, neurons, brain matter, gone, never going to come back. And since I couldn't read, write, or speak well, and I was having trouble saying words or writing words or coming up with those words, I thought, okay, maybe that's the way the brain works. I had lost X number of cells, and maybe that was an equation that said losing this number of cells meant that I lost these numbers of words. I thought in the beginning, very, very beginning, that was my first thought problem, that I must have lost X number of words. And I started looking mentally because that was the problem I set up, the equation I set up. And I started looking for things that I, quote, could not see. And that was the beginning of realizing that because I did a lot of walking and I would record myself and look at things, and everything I would study, I could see what they were, every single one. I could tell that I now couldn't pronounce them. I couldn't write them down. I had problems with certain words, what I called the bad letters. Turns out there were 13 good letters and 13 bad letters. That's what I came up with. But I did it several times, and when I tallied them, they were always 13 and 13. But for everything I saw, I could tell what they were, even if I couldn't articulate what they were. So the next day, because then I said, okay, I have not lost all those words. They are still there. I can see some, but I can't say some. That means that the damage is such that the brain is built in such a way that it's so redundant that in various modalities, I could see more or less damage with each of these different modalities. And I started to figure out, okay, so it's so redundant that I haven't lost entire sets of words or any number of words, but I did have damage such that I couldn't say certain letters, I couldn't find or pronounce or grasp of certain words or ideas or memory. Although I could see most of it, I just couldn't come up with the various modalities that allowed me to speak when I couldn't otherwise speak, or say or write when I otherwise couldn't say or write. So at that point, I figured out that the brain really is powerful, and that really is the beginning of me understanding how the brain really is powerful. Because as much as you have a broken bone, you can look at your hand that's broken. You can look at that. You can feel it. You can see what you can and can't do. You can feel the pain where it emanates from. That is what the brain allows you to do. But now that your brain has had damage in a certain area, in my case, it's in the Broca's area, but unfortunately, you can have lots of other issues anywhere in the brain, depending on what kind of stroke, how severe, and location of it in the brain. It just happened for me that it's in left side in the Broca's area. Having said that I could see the damage, I actually could mentally understand that I could see the damage, right? So that means it's so powerful that it can still use the skills that it has. The brain has those skills that it can still use to see the damage and articulate for me, still on the inside. Not that I could express it back, but I did do a lot of talking with myself, including some various me's on the inside, because I could actually see here in my head that, oh, Tom, as if it was Tom, I can see that in this case, I can do well with certain things. And in this case, I could not do those certain things, but I could do that in another modality. Because I could speak fairly well, but I couldn't write well at all. And the recording and all of these evidences, all the evidence helped me going forward. But that did let me know that the brain is so powerful that it can actually see the damage and tell the remaining cells, they're the good ones, that, hey guys, look over here, this is damage. Here's what you have to do to fix what is damaged. It's not different. It's not so different from a bone broken in your hand that is now going to get better. It sends a lot of, I'll say, energy. It sends a lot of instructions to the brain that says, you must do these things. Not realizing that what the brain is saying is, you must do these things that I do, meaning the brain does, every single day. But if I don't do those things, this part that is broken won't get as well as you would like it to do if you don't do what me, the brain, this component of the brain, this well part of the brain that directs, go do these things and you will fix what is broken. And this is all within the brain telling me consciously that this is part of what must be happening going forward. And that was how I came to understand that not only was I getting better, this took a long time later, but the fact that among my writing and reading and recording, it also turns out that inner speech is also still quite accidental, because most people do talk to themselves. Most people really do. In my case, I did that like, again, normal people do, not realizing that even the act of the inner speech that allows an individual, a healthy individual, to have that dialogue with other components of the brain that allows you to realize there's a problem. I understand. What should we do? We should do these things. Not me necessarily conscious of that dialogue on the inside until later, but since I was having those conversations and kept evidence of what was happening, A, I was getting better based on the activity. We found that out later. And B, that I saved the evidence so that I could see that later. So that for all of the inner speech that was occurring on the inside, of which I was aware, I was not aware that as a result of doing that, that conversation was part of the experience-dependent neuroplasticity, meaning the experience-dependent component of everything that induces plasticity, because it still converts thought and cognitive activities, otherwise called experience-dependent cognitive activities, into neuromatter. People ask me that all the time. Plasticity is the master of all learning. Yet we still don't talk about it because it seems to be so odd. I mean, we have photosynthesis where we convert light into sugars and into organic matter, and we do that every single day, and we become educated about that. But for the most part, as much as we know about photosynthesis when we are in third grade, most adults don't know anything about plasticity, even though they might have heard about it and understand, yeah, that's the way the brain works. But they really don't understand that based on the way it's constructed, that the brain will convert the thought, the cognitive activities, the experience-dependent component that induce, meaning they make, they create. You can use any number of words. They do those things to create neuromatter, to create not the cells, because I've said that to you before. The cells are gone. They are never coming back. Yes, there are other places in the brain that allows some cells to be developed, but not the ones we need here, at least for me, in the Broca's area. What is happening is the experience of the experience-dependent component of that. So that is what inner speech means. It isn't because somebody told you, okay, Tom, you had stroke and aphasia. I want you to go home and speak to yourself. That's never going to happen. Nor, given my experience, did my SLP ask me, hey, Tom, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Do you think about this? Do you actually talk about this? Do you talk to yourself about this? Do you talk out loud to yourself? All these things I just said to you? No, it never happened. Nobody ever asked those kinds of things. Why? Unfortunately, because of the therapy the way we have, and it's certainly constricted by insurance forms and funds, I got 30 sessions, which I thought was great until I realized that's 30 sessions, 30 minutes each. That's 15 hours. Oh my, 15 hours of therapy. So the wonderful SLPs that we get, they only have 15 hours to do the best they can to help explain what is otherwise going to be a marathon of activity that we have to go through for our whole life. Never mind the 15 hours that we got at the beginning. This is going to go on forever. And because the SLPs do what they do, they don't have the time to do only what they have, to explain certain tips, certain ideas, certain things to work with. And in 15 hours, in my case, which was good, some of my friends only had 8 hours, 12 hours. I got 15, all about insurance, right? That is what happens with that marathon. You start with the SLP, and then all the rest of that is all about yourself. Inner speech, no, nobody's ever going to tell you about it until you do what I happen to have done, what other people have done, and then can articulate that to other in the clinicians community and say, oh, yes, that is why you were doing that. And this is why you'll do better. And of course, they've done lots of studies about all this too. And inner speech happens to be, turns out, it happens to be another component of how the brain works. And it will help you get better going forward. I know I got all these stories to tell you about, and it's all about what was completely accidental and yet completely therapeutic, of which I did not know anything except based on who I was before my stroke, my habit before my stroke going forward. I do what I do so that you can better understand what you yourself are already going through. You may very well have done or seen or experienced many, if not most, of what I have done. Maybe you just didn't happen to do one thing or another, or save certain things, or had the evidence of certain things. But now that I tell you this, I'm hoping, and I'll bet you for sure, that the more I can explain these stories, the more it can map what you already saw and say, yes, that is exactly the way I felt or experienced about this or this or this or this, because it isn't just being told you can't do these things. You can't do any number of things at various levels of various modalities, so that you can do or not do well here, not here, and different components of the same modality. So it is interesting for all of us. I call it interesting. Why not? I got nothing else to do but think about this and write it down and speak about it for all of you. Have a good week. I will see you again in a couple of weeks. And good luck with everything, including, obviously, the virus. I hope you're all doing very well, working hard, and especially with the school year coming up, too. That is a very difficult issue to deal with. Good luck to everybody. Talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.